Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is What If Naruto Was a Girl Trained and Loved by Kakashi, Part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Jiraiya sent off a copy of his report to the daimyo after he checked with Tsunade. They'd agreed that the daimyo should be present if he wished to be when they arrested the corrupted members of the village civilian council. Now the only thing they could do was keep watch on the said individuals and await a reply from the daimyo. Tsunade's council were each assigned to keep watch over one of the indicated people and make note of their activities while they waited. Jiraiya still had the task of deciphering the notes for any purpose of their activities. In the village itself, members of the Rookie Nine were gathering along with Maida Guy's team to discuss the recent absence of one of their number. It seemed that Naruto was finally being missed as none of them could remember seeing him since the day of the fire in the slums. Ino asked Sakura, "So where's Naruto?" "How should I know? Kaka-sensei finally kicked him from the team when Sasuke-kun and I made Chunin. Now we don't have to be saddled with him anymore. It was getting hard to deal with him always getting us into troublesome situations." Sasuke just growled. He'd growled first when she'd mentioned their sensei and called him kun, and again when she'd said the Dobi got them into troublesome situations. He was quickly beginning to hate the pink-haired bitch as much as he'd hated his brother and knew it wouldn't be long before he killed the stupid bitch. His eyes narrowed as he glared at her. "Your sensei kicked the youthful Naruto from your team. Well, who's his sensei now? Whose team is he on now?" asked Lee. "I find I am curious about this as well," added Neji. "I don't know," answered Sakura. "And really, who cares? He's the worst ninja ever. I mean, come on. No matter how many times we told him orange wasn't a good color for a ninja, he kept wearing that same ridiculous suit. He was loud and obnoxious, always spouting off about how he was gonna be Hokage. As if pink isn't a good color for a ninja either," said Hinata quietly. "Yet she wears bright blood red with a huge white bullseye on her back and does nothing to conceal that mop on her head," added Tenten, glaring at the emerald-eyed girl. "And then there's the Uchiha with his clan symbol prominently displayed just in case they should cross paths with someone who doesn't immediately recognize him as the tragic hero of the worst massacre in history. As far as he's concerned anyway, though I dare say there are other clans who will disagree. Clans where no one survived the massacre," concluded Shino. "Gee, makes you wonder why they would think Naruto was bringing trouble down on them," said Kiba, giving the pair a pointed stare. Sasuke was finally stung into retorting. "Don't go lumping me into this. He didn't ask before he booted the Dobi. And she's the only one who's glad about it. Stupid girl." Shikamaru just looked at him. "You're the reason I'm glad he got free of your team. But I am sorry at the same time. For him. You two can roast for all I care," he said. Choji nodded. No one was sure whether he was thanking Ayame for the super-sized bowl of ramen she'd brought him or if he was agreeing with Shikamaru. "Shika, that wasn't a very nice thing to say," exclaimed Sakura. "We're both better ninja than he is and we proved it by making Chunin. How dare you say that about us? How dare any of you? Of course, Sasuke wears his clan symbol. He's proud of being an Uchiha, as he should be, and why would I cover up my beautiful hair? It doesn't stand out that much. Yeah, there's thousands of people with cotton candy pink hair running around the world and pink things in nature really do go bouncing through trees," sneered Shikamaru. Neji put in his 2 cents. "Hinata and I can't cover the sign of our clan, but we do our best not to broadcast it either, knowing full well recognition could bring harm to our comrades. You, Sasuke, flaunt your clan affiliation, and just how many places are there in this world that don't know you or the end of your once populous clan? Not many, I'd say. Yet, you walk right up to them all with the symbol of who you are in their face, defying them to wipe the clan off the face of the earth. And that endangers your team. Yet you blame Naruto-kun," finished Hinata. "I'd say there isn't a single member of your team that doesn't draw attention," sighed Tenten. Your sensei is famous in his own right and everyone who sees him knows who he is. That shock of silver hair. The headband over his eye. The mask he never removes. All very recognizable. Your coloration, Sakura, and the clothes you choose to wear. Sasuke with his Sharingan and his clan symbol, not to mention all the white in his standard clothes. White's fine for a snowy landscape, but there isn't much snow in Konoha. And Naruto with his blonde hair and blue eyes and whisker-marked face. All of you draw attention. So don't go blaming him for all your misfortune, wound up Ino. Sakura sat there blinking for a minute as everything her friends had said sunk in. It was true, they were all pretty easily recognized. Sasuke actually had the best chance of being unrecognized if he wished to. Naruto was too well known for his unique coloring and his whisker marks, he could do nothing to hide. She could at least dye her hair and get a different dress, but he and Kaka-sensei would always be easily spotted. Like Neji and Hinata, everyone knew the white eyes of the Hyuga clan just as they knew the mask-wearing, headband over his left eye, silver-haired man was Hitaki Kakashi, and the blonde-headed loudmouth with whisker marks and blue eyes was Uzumaki Naruto. Even if they put Naruto under a hinge, those whiskers were there. They could change everything about him except for those. And Kakashi couldn't lose the cover over his Sharingan eye either. But I don't want to dye my hair, she whined. No one said you had to, forehead girl. All we were doing was pointing out that it may not necessarily have been Naruto who always got your team into unnecessary fights. Any one of you could have been the cause. In fact, some of them were probably because the four of you were together and therefore recognized as a group. We're ninja, Sakura-chan. We strive to be different and to get our name known and feared by other nations. Each of us is unique and known to those beyond our borders. Some fear us while others praise us. So anyway, what does this have to do with where Naruto is? Asked Kiba. Does anyone know where he lives? He doesn't have a home anymore, said Hinata close to tears. What? Why not? Asked everyone except Shikamaru. His silence and downcast expression was noted by both Neji and Shino. The fire a week ago was his apartment building. He doesn't have the money to go anywhere else, the shy girl answered. Shikamaru added, and without a team he can't get any missions. So he might as well not be a ninja anymore. He stood up. I'm done with this. He walked out, not noticing the way Shino and Neji looked after him or the look they shared when he could no longer be seen. A few minutes later they both excused themselves also. Sasuke was too busy seething to realize the group was breaking up. So if the Dobi no longer had a home, how come he hadn't come to him for shelter? How dare that idiot sensei cast his rival to the winds by denying him the right to be a ninja? What was the Dobi supposed to do now? All he knew was fighting. He didn't know how to be a storekeeper or anything else. Without a word and, true to form, he stood up, ignoring the calls of Ino and Sakura to wait up for them, and stalked out of the ramen stand. Well, at least Sasuke is acting his usual stuck-up angry self, remarked Kiba, earning himself a hard glare from Ino and a raised fist from Sakura. Hinata just narrowed her eyes and glared at them until they backed off. Neither wanted to face the gentle girl if she got angry. Besides, Ino admitted to herself, there was some truth in his words. She might not like it, but Sasuke was an angry person and nothing but sparring with Naruto ever seemed to make him happy. She wondered why that was. While Ino was lost in thought, Sakura was making her exit. She couldn't stand the idea of her Sasuke-kun being too far away from her just in case he might finally decide he needed her in some fashion. She didn't fool any of the group though with her made-up excuse when she left. They all knew she was going to find the Uchiha and debase herself for him again. The entire village knew Sasuke was using her, but Sakura didn't see it. He was only wanting her to get pregnant, but she kept waiting for the ring. Even the council knew he'd never marry her, though her mother urged her to hold off on giving him his child until he put his ring on her finger. In the cavern behind the rock, Natsu was just waking up. Her body was burning out of control and there was something heavy lying almost on top of her. What had happened? She wondered as she opened her eyes. She found herself looking into the most handsome face she'd ever seen. Chiseled jawline just slightly covered in a silver stubble. Sculptured lips that were smiling. Wait a minute. Smiling. She raised her eyes, wondering just who the hell was in her bed. She felt his hands on her body and panic welled up as her eyes widened and her breath grew short. Following an instinct he'd never listened to before, Kakashi didn't give her brain a chance to tell her what had happened. He kissed her and held her body close to his, letting his hands knead her muscles until she relaxed and gave in to the pressure of her heat. She tried to bite back the moan of pleasure and need, but he heard it anyway. Smiling, he slowly continued to lower her defenses until she was writhing beneath him in ecstasy. Inside her mind, Kyuubi told the wolf, "Your cub is good." She didn't even have time to understand what has occurred. I wonder when he'll let her know. The wolf grinned. I told him to wait until she trust him. I can see she doesn't now. It's a good plan, but they don't have that long. His comrades will be here soon to take her back to Konoha. At least, they are all female. My cub doesn't quite know what is in store for him either, you know. You didn't tell him. Kyuubi wasn't all that surprised. Demon mating rituals weren't exactly the most comfortable subject for them. Wolf sighed. I tried. The damn boy has been celibate for far longer than he should have been, but he wouldn't listen when he first met her. I tried to tell him about her when he first met her. Then I tried to tell him to challenge her when she came back from that long training trip she went on, but he's almost as stubborn as I sense she is. He ignored me. He's very good at that. Well, she was very young then. It would have landed him in real trouble if any of their kind had found out he, a grown adult, was mating with a 15-year-old child. It didn't have to go that far. We could have controlled both of them. You, her and me, him. After all, we are only talking about controlling them for a few moons until she became legal. So you planned on challenging me even then? Of course. I recognized her scent as you did his. We both knew they belonged together, and I have always wanted to be your mate. Kyuubi's tails thumped the ground in happiness. They decided the wolf would send a spirit token into her cage so that they could converse, amongst other things, and yet he'd be able to keep an eye on his human. Since she couldn't get out to join him, they'd decided the best plan was for him to join her. But he would have no influence over Natsu any more than she would be able to influence Kakashi. Now the moon wolf curled up next to his mate and closed his eyes. Let them be, Kyuubi. They aren't going to mess this up, and she will fight the situation no matter what when she figures it out. She's too stubborn and much too proud to expect anything less. My cub will have his work cut out for him trying to make things right with her. 5 years of being ignored are not going to go away just because they mated. You forgot all the times he ridiculed her when he assumed she didn't understand him. Those will cost him more than the ignoring thing. She actually grew to look forward to being ignored by him rather than being denigrated. So let's just get some rest while we can. She'll keep us both busy enough later when she tries to kill him again. The two demons closed their eyes and tightly entwined fell asleep together, sharing their dreamscape as the two humans mated in their conscious mind. Kakashi was lost in the scent of his wife, his mate. He didn't care what would happen when this time was over and she regained control over herself. It made no difference to him that the ritual challenge wasn't the only fight he would have for his wife. He had her and he wasn't going to give her up for anyone. In the tunnels of the Warren, Yugao had taken the lead from Anko, who'd gotten hurt while disarming the rock chip trap. Jeez, they really didn't want anyone getting through to them, did they? She muttered to Shizune in a quiet voice the rest of the party couldn't hear. Shizune only smiled and shook her head. They'd come upon another trap. This one ninwire that would trigger sizzling hot steam to burn the skin of the approaching person or party. The steam was actually hot enough to melt off flesh where it was encountered, and while this trap was technically not as dangerous as the smashing walls or the flying rock chips, it was still plenty dangerous. Idly they all wondered just how Kakashi had managed to get by all the traps and how were they to disarm this one. They'd already tried cutting the ninwire. New strands had just rolled out to replace what had been cut and it had triggered the release of the steam. They'd tried to move around the wires without touching them, but the wires were too close together and too plentiful to let them through. None of them were as large as Kakashi, but they weren't as small as Natsu either, even though half the party didn't know the girl they were there to retrieve. Admitting they were stumped, they backtracked to look for a different route around the difficult trap. Kurenai never even thought to try releasing any genjutsu over the trap. If she had, she might have found the way through the wires, since not all of them were real. Instead, they spent about 3 hours backtracking before Pakun led them back to the wire trap. Sighing, as all 4 women began complaining, he said, "Kurenai, dispel the illusion." Blinking, they all looked at each other sheepishly. They all knew they would have more than a few nightmares over the deviousness of this girl they were after. Shizune and Yugao had similar thoughts as to their own stupidity in not thinking about why they'd brought Kurenai along. Both of them knew it was unreasonable to expect the fox demon, known for its cunning and trickery, to sit out the creation of traps meant to snare the unwary. All 4 women had much greater respect for Kakashi's skill as a ninja now, since Pakun had told them he'd reached the girl the day before they had entered the labyrinth. None of them could think of this place as anything but a warren or a labyrinth that led to a lair somewhere. Once Kurenai had dispelled the illusion, they picked their way through the trap and Anko asked the dog, "How much farther?" "We should reach it sometime tomorrow," he answered. They didn't need to know he was taking them the long way around and letting them stumble across more traps than was necessary. He wanted his human to have as much time claiming and imprinting the girl as he could give him. Maybe the day after that. Kakashi's scent is kind of confusing in places. Hard to tell which way he went sometimes. Kurenai narrowed her eyes. "You wouldn't be leading us in circles now, would you?" she asked sweetly, but suspicion dripped from the honeyed word. "Now would I do that?" the dog asked. "Would you like to feel my paw?" He held out his front paw. "It's nice and soft." Kurenai couldn't help herself. She laughed as Anko snorted. Yugao and Shizune shared another glance. Pakun only said that when he wanted to distract someone. And the only reason to distract them was if Kurenai was right. They decided to rest for a few hours and made camp in the tunnel. Once both Anko and Kurenai were asleep, Yugao asked, "Okay Pakun. Why don't you want us to find Kakashi and Natsu yet?" "Who said I didn't?" "Pakun," said Shizune in a warning tone. "Okay. Kakashi has won the challenge and they are mated, but she has yet to accept it. Her body knows it but her mind resists. I want to give him as much time as I can before life interrupts them." "Then he forced her?" asked Yugao with a dangerous note in her voice. "No. For the last time. That was never even possible. She chose him. It's hard to explain. Her body, her inner self knows he is her mate. It's her outer self that hasn't accepted it yet. She's fighting herself at the moment." "Ah, I see," said Shizune. "Yes, it would be hard for her to admit to herself that he is to be in her life forever. Indeed. Especially with how he's acted for the last 5 years. She's going to think he only wants her because of her form. Unfortunately, giving him more time, in this way, won't help him win that particular battle," added Yugao. "What are you two talking about?" asked Anko. The trio turned and found themselves staring into the determined eyes of their comrades. "I think they have been keeping secrets from us, Anko," said Kurenai. "Yes, I think you're right, Kurenai. And I for one will not take another damn step until I know the fucking truth. Who the hell did Kakashi find and what the hell is this about being her mate?" The 2 women shared another glance at which Kurenai snapped, "Quit that. You 2 have been doing that since we entered the trees outside the walls." "I agree with Anko. Either you tell us the full story or Kakashi and his female can stay where they are." Pakun gave a doggy grin. "I don't think either of them would mind that at all." "Tsunade will kill us," said Yugao, to which Shizune retorted, "She'll kill us either way. If we come back to the village without Natsu, we're dead. If we tell them who the girl really is, we're still dead." "Natsu. That's the girl's name?" asked Kurenai. Shizune nodded. What's so important about her? She is very special. She has had a very hard life, but it hasn't soured her much. She is sweet and kind to those who show her any kind of normalcy and closed and hidden to those who don't. Anko looked around them at the labyrinth they were in. I'm guessing she is somehow bonded with some sort of animal. You might say that, said Yugao. Why do I have the feeling we already know this girl? Asked Kurenai. Well, in a way, you do, admitted Shizune. And in a way, you've never met her, for all that she has always lived in Konoha, added Yugao. But I will add there is no one more important than her in the entire village. Especially to Tsunade-sama. She is the only one who can fill her own shoes in the shoes of her ancestors, said Shizune. And we can't tell you anything more about her identity than that, concluded Yugao. Okay, said a very confused duo. They had no idea who this girl was, but both concluded she had to be a civilian for them not to know her. One other question that you can answer if you choose to, said Kurenai. Is she a civilian or a ninja? She's a very unique ninja, admitted Yugao, only realizing at the last second that led to another question. She closed her eyes and sighed. Her rank is genin before you ask, and no, she isn't 12. She's 17. No, Kakashi isn't taking advantage of her. She'll be 18 soon enough, added Shizune. We can't really go into details, but this isn't against her will. That's still awfully young for him, said Kurenai disapprovingly. He's 28 already. That's only 10 years older. Not a lifetime for most in our culture. I know I've betted guys who were a lot older than that, smirked Anko. Yeah, but you weren't considered married to them the next morning, answered Kurenai. My understanding is that she is. Well, yes. When we get back to Konoha, she will move into his house with him and be recognized as his wife. He will not have it so easy to convince her of that, though. She won't be any happier about it than you are. Though for different reasons, smirked Shizune and Yugao together. Trust us. Kakashi has a whole lot of ground to cover before he will be able to sleep without keeping one eye open, said Yugao. And since he only has one eye that he can afford to keep open all the time, added Pakun, letting the two women draw their own conclusions. It only took a few seconds before Kurenai laughed outright while Anko's laugh was low, dark and chilling. Maybe I'll give her some pointers, she said simply. Don't you dare, Mitarashi Anko, snapped Shizune. She doesn't need any help to keep him on his toes. The girl is vicious enough, agreed Yugao, indicating the trap they'd just cleared. Anko's grin grew wider. All four women shared a look and burst out laughing again. Poor Kakashi doesn't really know what he got himself into, does he? Laughed Kurenai. No one bothered to answer, as they thought it was pretty clear that no matter what he might think, his new wife was more than a match for his brilliant mind. A day passed with everything remaining much the same. The rookie 9+3 were avoiding the former teammates of Naruto and looking all over the place for the boy, knowing he was more than likely avoiding them all. He had every reason to avoid them, they admitted. None of them had ever really shown him any help, though they all knew the crappiness of his team. And most admitted they hadn't even known where he lived. Shikamaru, though, wasn't looking for him. He knew his friend had left the village the day of the fire. Instead, he was helping Tsunade get rid of Naruto's enemies. Tsunade, her chosen council, and Jiraiya were still waiting on answer from the daimyo, though Tsunade did send a messenger slug to Shizune telling her to tell Kakashi the story they'd cooked up to keep Natsu out of trouble with the council in case they got back before she had the troublesome members arrested and tried for treason. Though she could have trusted Pakun to pass the message on, she'd forgotten to tell him to tell Kakashi. In the labyrinth, the tracker team was still fighting their way through the traps, trying to reach the lair where their target was confined with Kakashi. And in the lair itself, Kakashi was doing his level best to keep his mate's mind too occupied to allow rational thought. Thanks to her demon-driven heat, the job wasn't all that difficult. Though sometimes their joining was definitely more anger-driven than anything else, he still succeeded in delaying her thought process enough not to have to answer any questions he didn't want to. And answering her questions, he decided, was something that could wait until he'd figured out the answers himself. The day after that, the retrieval team was at the rock guarding the entrance of the lair. "We're here," said Pakun. "Kakashi and his mate are on the other side of this rock, but we should probably give them a few more minutes." He paused and his head to the side and added, "Maybe an hour or two." None of the women knew a dog could leer until that moment, and Kurenai made a mental note to slap Kiba silly if she ever saw that look on Akamaru's face. The other women all groaned and called out to Kakashi. "Kakashi, time to go. Wrap it up," and sat down to wait. None of them really wanted to see another couple in the all together and otherwise engaged in private activities. Kakashi ignored the call and set to taking care of his mate's heat rush again. They'd barely taken the necessary time to eat, but he knew it was time to take her home. After he settled her heat, he dragged himself from the bed and picked her up. He carried her over to the indoor hot spring and walked in, still holding her close to him. She was drowsy as she always was when she was sated but not asleep. "Kashi, what's going on?" she whispered. "The retrieval team has arrived to escort us back to Konoha. They're here to protect you until you get back to Tsunade." "I'm not going back there," she said, running her hand over the surface of the water and then raising it. She used chakra to bring the water up with her hand and let the thin tendrils dance over the surface. As she moved her hand, the water performed an intricate dance as if it were a living entity. Kakashi watched entranced by the simple manipulation until Anko banged on the rock, telling them in her own ever so polite way to hurry the up and just get it done already. He smirked as he played with Natsu's long hair, which had managed to get entangled around his hand. He sighed as he decided Anko was quite capable of blowing the rock to smithereens if they took too long. "Unless you want them staring at all your secrets, you'd better hurry and get cleaned up. We have to go back or Tsunade will disassemble the world to find you." "And then what? I get to starve on a street corner?" "I don't think so." She looked him full in the face, the raw anger in her very blue eyes unmistakable. "I'll make it right, Natsu. But you'll be on the team as Natsu. Not that orange-wearing boy." "No, I won't." She turned and stomped out of the pool. She marched over to her clothes though and began repacking everything into her scrolls except for what she would be wearing. She chose a lime green shirt of netting under a tinker's jacket of emerald green with red and gold embroidery. Her hips and the top of her legs were covered by matching lime green lace tights and a short emerald green skirt. Around her waist she fastened her belt with the kunai and first aid kit. Strapped high under her skirt she carried an extra pouch filled with everything from kunai to ninwire. She placed a silk band around her head to keep her hair out of the way as she packed the scrolls into her bag. When she was done packing, she turned around, found him dressed. A wave of her hand and the rock guarding the door disappeared. To him she said, "Anko could have tried all day to destroy that rock. But since it was never really there, it wouldn't have worked." She smirked as she crossed her arms. He didn't reply, choosing instead to hold out her green sandals. She sat down as the women came into the cavern and put on her shoes. Kakashi was already dressed. He was using a genjutsu to disguise his face since Natsu had ripped his real mask during their challenge fight. He didn't really care though. She could rip all the masks she wanted to so long as he had her by his side. She stood up and his eye filled with pride as he saw the amazement on Kurenai and Anko's faces. Shizune and Yugao, he concluded, already knew who she was. Anko shook her head and asked the first question that came into her mind, "What did you mean that rock was never really there?" "It was too. I pounded on the damn thing. It was a solid illusion," Natsu answered, truthfully. She frowned at them. "I did the same thing to the monument when I was 12. Sheesh. Kurenai shouted, "That was you? I thought it was that Naruto boy who got in trouble for it. Why'd you let him take the blame and credit for your prank?" Natsu just her head to the side and gave her a perplexed look. Didn't the woman have eyes in her head? She was supposed to be the woman who used genjutsu as if it were the air she breathed. Kurenai blinked as everyone was giving her the same look. "What?" she asked. "Kurenai, you're my friend, but sometimes I wonder about you," said Anko. Take a good look at her. Notice the coloring. Notice the markings. Who does it remind you of? Kurenai looked again. She was blonde but so much prettier than Ino with the red highlights on the ends of her hair. They looked natural too. Her blue eyes were the same as Naruto's, as were the whisker marks on her cheeks. Wait. Whisker marks. Naruto. She whispered. You're Naruto. But, he's Hinata. He's a boy. Okay. If you say so. But I'm pretty sure I'm not, answered Natsu. The rest of the group lost it. Pakun took that moment to walk up to Kakashi. He delivered the message to his master and asked if he'd given him enough time. Kakashi just smiled ruefully. I think that would take more than a week, as he glanced at Natsu, who was growling at the nindog. Shizune moved over to her and started scolding her. You know, it really wasn't very nice to leave Tsunade a letter. Then she shouldn't have listened to Numbskull here. She jerked her thumb over her shoulder at Kakashi. Snorting, she muttered, underneath, my. He winced as all the women except Kurenai, who was still coming to terms with Naruto being a girl, smirked at him and raised a brow at the same time. What the hell, he thought. Did they practice that? I think we can discuss my failings later on. Shall we go home now? Though everyone else missed the sign of anger in Natsu's eyes, he didn't. Even if he hadn't heard the soft growl, his fox mark would have told him she was anything but pleased. It had been steadily pulsing ever since he'd put her in the hot spring, but the pulse was growing stronger and closer together with every minute they spent just standing here in her lair. Angrily, she brushed past the group and stormed into the tunnel. Kurenai called out as she neared the first of the traps, but Natsu just waved her hand and walked on through the passage. She made a left, followed immediately by a right, and knelt down to disable another spring-loaded trap. The group of experienced nin right behind her, though it was not an easy fit for Kakashi, who was a lot taller and heavier than Natsu was. 20 minutes later they had passed a landslide where an unlikely suitor had been buried beneath the rubble. Of course Moon Wolf had gathered all the unsuitable mates as a trophy gift for Kyuubi, but still Natsu felt no compunction to put the debris back where it belonged. Kurenai asked, aren't you going to reset that trap also? Why would I? It served its purpose. She sneered at the debris. Besides, which trap have you seen me reset since we left my lair? Kurenai blinked and realized the only time the girl had stopped moving was when a trap held supplies she wanted to regather. Otherwise she'd just waved a hand and walked through a trap field. Just how many of these traps were illusionary? Most of them, Natsu admitted. But if you believe a thing to be real, then it's real enough to kill you. Why? Why so many traps, and why not more made from real things? Naruto never had enough money for much equipment after paying for other more necessary things. Genin pay isn't that bad, Kurenai said defensively, to which Natsu just snorted. It isn't. You're not the only orphan who had to live on it. They managed to get by. Natsu whirled on her, her hair flying free in a half circle as she spun. Anger radiated off her like a cloud. Kakashi quick-stepped in front of her before she could lay into the woman, and Yugao and Shizune both gave Kurenai a look that told her to shut up if she didn't want to get hurt. Kakashi had Natsu trapped and was speaking low and quietly to her. It sounded to the rest as if it was mostly growls and rumbles, but she was calming down. Finally they relaxed when they heard her mutter, "Let go of me, Kashi." He complied and she turned and walked off, the only sign she was still angry, her clenched fists and snapping hair. And, yeah, her hair was still swinging and snapping in the energy of her anger. Kakashi just stood watching in amazement for a minute as the rest of the party came up next to him. Kurenai, I respect you as a fellow Junin, but don't ever say something that stupid to my wife again. Her situation is nothing like any other genin you've ever met, he said calmly as he walked off to catch up to Natsu, who was at the last trap waiting for them to catch up. She dispelled it, taking some of the sharpened rocks from the walls before moving on. A few minutes later and they were outside the labyrinth. She led them 10 yards away from the entrance and then ran through a complicated series of 30 hand signs. On the last one all she said was, "Be filled." Dirt and rock came flying through the air and flowed into the entrance of the labyrinth. Everyone ducked and watched in amazement as the area was returned to its natural state. "Why'd you do that?" asked Anko. "I thought this was to be your new home." "Because I'm not stupid. I'll never be allowed my freedom. Even if Tsunade was willing to let me go, he won't." She jerked her thumb at Kakashi again and turned for Konoha, leaving her brief taste of freedom behind her. She said nothing more about it, once again locking her pain deep inside, but through the seal, Kakashi was aware of it. His heart ached to comfort her, but his mind knew she wouldn't accept it from him. Not yet anyway. Instead, he just walked beside her and used his nose to tell him when her need was getting out of her control again. He called a halt 2 hours later and led his wife off from the other women. He knew she'd be mortified if they knew why he'd called a halt, but she was also in deep need and he wanted more than anything to satisfy that need. He quickly pitched his tent and led her inside. He put up a silencing spell which she managed to strengthen before growling, "Damn it. I know. You don't like it, but I can make it go away for now. One day at a time, Natsu. One thing at a time," he reassured her as he began to soothe her frazzled nerves. He kissed her, holding her as close to him as he could get, though he kept a hand on his seal on her neck and placed her hand over the one she'd given him. The pulsing rhythm of the seal calmed yet excited her until she forgot she didn't like this situation and let him make love to her. Of course, the sensations he awoke with his mouth and free hand didn't hurt things either. Before long, she was writhing underneath him and he was pleasing her in ways she'd never dreamed of. His mouth was doing very sinful yet delicious things between her legs and she was crying out with yips and growls of pleasure. Her juices flowed and mingled with his saliva, but he just lapped it all up, enjoying the abandon with which she was splayed out for him. He ran his tongue over her seal before settling on which he wanted to taste. She groaned and raised her chest with her hands fisted in his silver locks. "Kashi," she moaned. "Do something, Kami, damn it." He laughed as he slid inside the tight sheath. He marveled again at how such a small woman could feel like such a perfect fit for him. He knew from locker room talk he wasn't a small man, but she took every inch perfectly and matched him thrust for thrust. They released at the same time and he rubbed her back as she snuggled into his warmth for some sleep. Finally, he pulled the sleeping bag over them and drifted into sleep with her. They slept for 2 hours before Natsu woke up hungry. She'd missed eating that day and wanted some food. She tried to move out of Kakashi's embrace, but he only tightened his arms. Cursing him, she snarled, "Damn it, Kashi, let me go. I'm hungry." He woke up and released his grip. He laid back and watched as she got dressed. He'd never get tired of watching her. When she was done, she unzipped the tent and looked for the rest of the group. Yugao and Shizune were sitting by the fire, and when they saw her, Yugao got up to get a hairbrush. By the time she came back with it, Natsu was sitting beside Shizune eating a plate of camper's stew over rice. Yugao began brushing the golden locks as the girl ate daintily. Kakashi came out a few minutes later and grabbed a plate of stew also. He sat down close to Natsu, but not where he couldn't see what Yugao was doing to get the snarls out of the long hair. When she was done brushing and detangling the mass, she separated it into 3 sections and then took the first and put it over one of Natsu's shoulders. Natsu groused as her hair landed in her plate, but knew better than to complain too loudly. Yugao's fingers had a nasty habit of pulling very tightly. The last section was tossed over her other shoulder as Yugao began to braid the middle section. When the braid was finished, she wrapped it in the red thread Natsu reluctantly handed her. Then Yugao moved to the next section. Natsu was frowning but sitting still, holding her chin in one hand with her elbow on her knee. The other arm lay across her lap, her fingers tapping an irritated beat against her thigh. Kakashi grinned at the resemblance to Naruto. He knew she was impatient with how long she'd have to sit there patiently while waiting for Yugao to finish her hair. Then he noticed Shizune was holding a kit in her hands. She had pulled out a green thread much like the red one Yugao had used on the previous braid. Yugao took it from her and Shizune watched as the new braid was wrapped in the same fashion as the last one. Then Yugao grabbed the last section of hair and tugged to make Natsu sit up straighter. The girl growled but complied. For a few minutes before swapping arms and leg, Shizune handed Yugao the gold thread and Kakashi watched as she wrapped it around the last braid. Then she grabbed all 3 braids and gave them a fierce tug, startling a cry from Natsu and a growl from Kakashi. He was standing over Yugao before he'd realized he'd even moved. Natsu put her hand on his leg and he looked down at her where she sat on the log. He blinked and shook his head. He stepped back whispering, "What the hell?" Inside his head a voice answered, "You will always react to someone hurting her now, cub. She is your mate. Mother of your cubs. You will die to protect her." He blinked sitting up straight on the log. He had no idea who was talking to him for a couple of minutes and then he remembered the stories his father had told of the clan's secret. The moon wolf. Yep. Those weren't fairy tales, cub. I'm as real as you are. As she is. And you have got a hard road to hoe because you wouldn't listen to me. Kakashi couldn't conceal his sigh. He looked to Natsu to see her smirking at him. There was definitely a devious twinkle in her eye as well and he almost shivered. Almost. He again grew fascinated with what Yugao was doing with his wife's hair. He liked it loose but he understood she couldn't go into the field that way. It'd be too easy to capture her. Yugao was twining the 3 braids intricately around the girl's head, interspersing them in a complicated fashion until her whole head was covered with a braid and sparkling in metallic color. Red, green, and gold twinkled in the light of the afternoon sun. Yugao finally patted her shoulder and Natsu gave a heartfelt yip of gratitude. Then she leapt up into the tree overhead and began her exercise program. She'd just finished her warm-up and was starting her taijutsu when Anko and Kurenai poked their heads out of their tents to see what was going on. All 5 of the adults watched in amazement as the tiny slip of a female kept her place in the leafy calliope of riotous color over their heads. Natsu was leaping and twirling and bouncing from one limb to another with seeming abandon. Yet there was no wasted movements as she moved, bending and twisting her frame in way Kakashi knew damn good and well the human form wasn't meant to go. Her flexibility, though, he knew for certain went farther than what she was showing right now. Right now she was only doing taijutsu. Damn it, Natsu. I just got done doing your hair. Now you're gonna need a bath and it'll be loose again, complained Yugao. She can't do her own hair? Asked Kurenai. Well, she can brush it. And put it into pigtails like Tsunade wears, answered Shizune. But not into practical styles for ninja, added Yugao. Then she should cut it off, said Kurenai. Kakashi gave her a murderous look and growled out, no she shouldn't. I'll get her a damn hairdresser if she needs one first. Calm down Kakashi, said Shizune. She isn't cutting it. He replied, still furious at the idea of all that beauty being gone. Everyone she knows feels the same way. No one will cut it for her. It's never been cut in her life, reassured Yugao. All the hair cutters in the village have strict orders they are not to even snip off one lock of her hair. He finally smiled smugly. Well, then you have a major problem, said Kurenai bluntly. Everyone looked at her. She's a ninja with hair down to her rear. Hair that she can't dress alone. They'd been so absorbed in their conversation they hadn't realized Natsu was finished her workout. Until she spoke from right beside Kakashi. Are you trying to get Kashi to kick your butt, Kurenai? Sheesh. It's not like I ever go out into the field looking like this. Damn woman. Think before you open your mouth. I go into the field as Naruto. Well, I used to. Now I don't go into the field at all. She glared at Kakashi. I told you I'd fix that. Sure you will. I believe that as much as I believe when we get back there won't be any more idiots and murderous fiends in the village. You can't fix it. I can and I will, but you are going to be you and not Naruto. You have a lot of confidence in yourself for a blind man. What the hell makes you think for one damn minute I want back on that screwed up team? You enjoy watching that damn prick try to kill me. Careful how you answer that, Kakashi, whispered Shizune and Yugao as both Kurenai and Anko held their breath. He just looked at her and said, he won't try to kill you. He just enjoys a good spar. Going from dead still to full-blown blur in less than a heartbeat. Natsu attacked as Shizune and Yugao announced, "Wrong answer, Kakashi," and Natsu screamed, "Chidori is not a sparring move and you damn well know it." Her feet flew into his stomach and then she was behind him kicking up into his butt and sending him face first into the dirt. Before he could get back on his feet she was at him again kicking into his stomach as he tried to fend her off. She kicked him into the air next to the tree she'd used for a workout and put her taijutsu moves to good practice. He finally uncovered his eye just to keep up with her as she flipped and twisted all around both him and the tree they were in. She was in complete anger-driven control and she was kicking his butt. Crap, he thought. I forgot Sasuke had used that move on Naruto a lot lately. In his head the moon wolf called out, "Stupid cub. Way to get yourself killed before the honeymoon is over. Kyuubi, calm her down before she kills him. He doesn't heal like she does." The four women were just watching as Natsu, a girl half Kakashi size, wiped the floor with him and he couldn't get a blow in edgewise. None of them could quite believe what they were seeing, but at least three of them knew he damn well deserved it for the way he'd treated Naruto. The fourth was thinking that if it was true that he had allowed one student to use a Chidori on the other, then he was only getting what he had coming. They noticed Kakashi wasn't attacking back, choosing instead to defend and try to restrain his opponent. But it really didn't look like Natsu was in any mood to let that happen anytime soon. But as suddenly as it began, it was over and the girl was on her knees with a hand to her neck and an expression of pain on her face. "What happened? I know damn well you never touched her. Why is she in pain?" demanded Yugao. "The seal," he answered simply as he walked over and picked her up. He took her hand off the seal on her neck and put it over the one on his. Calmly he placed his hand over her seal and sat down with her in his lap, thinking nothing but soothing thoughts. As he concentrated on easing her pain and her anger, his mind began wandering and his new thoughts were being transmitted to her as well. With her face buried into his vest she mumbled, "Kashi, that's not helping, you jerk," but he noticed she snuggled in closer all the same. He rumbled with contentment and she smiled. Kurenai and Anko took over the watch as Kakashi took his wife back to their tent. Shizune and Yugao took their places inside the other tents after warning Anko and Kurenai to just let Kakashi and Natsu sleep. Kurenai frowned, but Anko reminded her that on this mission they were the objects to be protected. Besides, she added, "How would you like to be ordered to work when you're newly married of less than a week? Until we get home, Natsu is not to be out of our sight, and yeah, we could order Kakashi to take a turn on watch, but he's already keeping a closer eye on her than we are." "Okay, Anko. I am soon not going there. Then just accept it. We'll wake Shizune and Yugao in 6 hours and catch a brief nap if Natsu isn't chomping at the bit to be moving by then. Though if she's really anything like Naruto, she will be." Morning came and Shizune made a quick breakfast of rice porridge. Natsu turned her nose up at it, causing Kakashi to laugh at her. She looked at him, blinking quietly, not really awake yet since she was safe with both Yugao and Shizune nearby. "Eat, Natsu," he told her. She moved the spoon around in the dish but wasn't really awake enough to eat any. Shizune sighed and took the bowl away. "Carry her, Kakashi-san. She's not awake yet and won't be for a couple of hours, but we've spent enough time in one spot. If there are any pursuers still around, they'll find us if we wait any longer." The campsite was quickly cleansed and the tents packed away. Yugao took Kakashi's pack as he settled his wife on his back and leapt into the trees, followed by the four women. The only one of the group that seemed to be having a problem with Natsu was Kurenai, and no one could understand why. But Kurenai's thoughts were centered on her female student and the major-sized crush the girl had on the orange-wearing boy who was nothing but a fraud. For all the girl thought he was the most real person she'd ever met. After 2 hours of traveling, Natsu was squirming on Kakashi's back and he stopped to put her on his feet as she complained, "Your back is too broad. My legs hurt." He chuckled and whispered in her ear, "That's not what I heard last night." She blushed fiery red and glared at him but didn't respond. Just before she leapt ahead of him, she very slowly let her glance travel his entire length before licking her lips. His breath quickened and he started to reach for her as she leapt away laughing. Her laughter was as beautiful as she was, he thought, as he dashed after her. Shizune looked at Yugao and the two smiled. Tsunade would be pleased. Anko said, I don't think I've ever seen Kakashi so happy. At least not since Yondaime died, and I'm not sure he was ever this happy before then. No, he's happier now, confirmed Yugao, who had graduated at the same time as Kakashi and actually knew the Junin the best of them all. She's still a little liar who's been hiding a damn big secret that's gonna hurt a lot of people, snapped Kurenai. Anko looked at her strangely until it dawned on her. Oh, you mean Naruto's one and only fangirl? He never tried to be anything more than a friend to so as not to get her hurt by people trying to kill him. Grow up, Kurenai. That's not Natsu's fault. Her secret was much more important than a schoolgirl crush. Hinata loves that boy because she believes him to be the most honest person she's ever met. And he's nothing but a bundle of lies. Everything about the kid was fake. So what? It kept her alive. What do you think he should have done? Gone up to her and said, oh, by the way, Hinata, before you faint again, I'm not a boy, so go crush on somebody else. Yeah, that would have worked considering every time he goes near her she falls to the floor. He could have just tried, oh, I don't know. Maybe being a girl in the first place. Kurenai was so into the argument that she didn't realize everyone had stopped and were staring at the two of them. Yeah, you're right, Kurenai. I could have done that, but at what age should I have decided the village was safe enough to be myself? And how long would it have taken before someone decided to show me just what girls were good for when they have no family to protect them? But then you believe all little girls are spoiled little fragile things like Hinata and yourself. Well, too bad you're wrong. I wasn't willing to be raped for Hinata-sama. Sorry. She turned and leapt away again. The rest of the group turned to follow each of them, giving Kurenai a look of total disgust as they followed after Natsu. Kakashi realized his wife was crying as he caught up to her. He swung her off the branch she had just touched down on and carried her bridal style. Shish, she doesn't know the truth about growing up alone. And has never had to imagine what it would be like to be a little girl growing up that way. She didn't mean to upset you. Though his own insides churned and he yearned to teach Kurenai a lesson for hating on Natsu, he knew calming her was more important right now. She clutched at his vest and buried her face there until she regained her composure. He looked down after a few minutes and found her to be sleeping. He hugged her tighter and wondered why she was sleeping again. In his head, the moon wolf explained. Mating rituals in her first heat has taken a lot out of her. She's not free of the heat yet either. Plus she didn't eat anything yet, and that spiteful woman really upset her because apparently she knows there will be a lot of people denouncing her for hiding her gender no matter what the reasons were. She's scared and upset, so Kyuubi has pulled her into the cage to comfort her. Kyuubi has her in the cage? It's comforting her. Are you sure? He glanced down at his peaceful-looking wife as his own demon contact chuckled. Just as I will never hurt you, Kyuubi will never hurt her. Kyuubi has even more reason than I do to help the girl. If your mate dies, so will my mate, so we will all protect her. All of us. You will not put her on that team with that boy again either. But why not? Sasuke has never hurt a girl in his life. The moon wolf just blinked. Then he shook his head. Wasn't just me you were ignoring, was it, cub? That boy hurts everyone who cares about him. He's using the pink-haired girl right now, trying to get her with Cub. That way he gets her off the team and he gets a possible heir to his clan. He's tried more than once to kill Kyuubi's kit. Your mate. He wants nothing more than to kill her for being in the group that killed his brother. He thinks she killed his brother just to spite him. But if he finds out his rival is a female, he will hurt her. He will hurt her badly. Kakashi stayed silent the rest of the trip. Just as the sun was setting, they dropped down in front of the guard post and he discovered Natsu was awake and looking at him patiently. You could put me down now, Kashi. My legs do work quite well, you know. Wincing in memory of just how well her legs worked and then grinning wickedly, he leaned in and whispered, That they do, and I'm gonna enjoy testing just how well they work when we get home. She blushed again as her eyes took on a half-lidded look. And just what makes you think I will be allowed to go anywhere tonight? He set her on her feet but stayed next to her as he said, because if the old hag doesn't let me take you home, she might just get more of a show than even she can handle. I'm not waiting all night to enact my plans for you. She continued to blush but a brow as she peered up at him, too intent on their conversation to realize they'd been cleared to go to the Hokage's office. Yugao reached for Kakashi's arm as Shizune reached for Natsu's. The two were tugged back to the real world as the guards laughed and pondered out loud. Now I wonder just what Kakashi-san could have been saying to make her blush that hard and yet look at him like that. The group passed out of range of the gate guards and followed the women to the tower where Tsunade was waiting. Shikamaru saw them and fell into step with them. I see you found her, Kakashi. Don't hurt her. He then turned and walked off into the crowd, making it clear he wasn't a rival but would settle the score if Kakashi treated Natsu even remotely as badly as he had treated Naruto. How many are gonna talk to me like that? He asked. No one in particular. Depends, I guess, answered Natsu. Uruka Nisan will probably try to beat the crap out of you anyway. Naruto meant a lot to him since he was the one Naruto went to when he had questions he couldn't answer or needed things he couldn't get. So you won't be escaping that one no matter what. Jiraiya might say something similar, and of course Ba-chan, and if you smart off to her I'll kick your. Again. He grinned. That's a much shorter list than I thought it was going to be actually. Why? I thought Naruto was pretty well liked by the Rookie 9. She snorted. The only ones of them who even knew where Naruto lived were Hinata and Shikamaru. And by the way, Red Eyes, you might just want to double check your facts before you judge Hinata-sama feelings for Naruto. She knew I was a girl cause she peeked. But, she always. Well, what did you think? Did you think she'd blow my secret by calling me Chan or something? Real friends don't do that. She and Shikamaru both knew since our academy days. They're the only ones who took the time and trouble to think for themselves and follow their own thoughts. They decided I was right about them being openly friends with me, so we hid our friendship. But she faints when you say 2 words to her. Kurenai said. It's an act. If you'll think back, you'll realize she never fainted until her supposed crush. It was a good way for us to have contact without anyone being any the wiser. She couldn't just disappear for a couple hours to meet me somewhere. Since her attempted kidnapping, things got tighter around her, so she always had guards on her. Just then Hinata came running around the corner. Natsu stepped out of the group of adults so she could be seen. Hinata saw her and her whole face lit up as she rushed over to embrace her friend. Oh Natsu. You get to be you now. I'm so happy. But what happened? Where did you go? Did he hurt you? She looked at Kakashi with a definitely unfriendly look in her eye. I'll tell you another time. I've got to go see Ba-chan now. I understand the fat cow has been looking for me. Hinata covered her mouth and tried to smother her giggles as Natsu showed her respect for the woman who meant the world to her. Okay, tempura restaurant or Yondaimi's head. Natsu looked at Kakashi consideringly before saying, I think his place. Somehow I don't think I have much choice right now. Hinata also looked at Kakashi. And where do you live, Hataki-san? She inquired politely, giving him a small bow while still holding Natsu's hand. Kakashi smiled and gave her his address, believing Natsu would need the companionship of her friend over the next few weeks no matter how badly he wanted to be the one she relied on. His head was telling him firmly that women needed the companionship of their own kind more than men did. The smile he got from Natsu made everything alright. To him it was as if the sun came out and he felt much better about telling another person where he could be found. They went into the tower as Hinata took off for her home to fix food for 3, believing that there would be nothing worth eating in a bachelor's pad. She was more right than she knew. Natsu stayed with the group, letting them fall into position around her and hide her from view as best they could. Only when she safely reached Tsunade's inner chamber did she break away from the group again. Her large beautiful smile broke free again, and it was a natural smile instead of the fake one Naruto always wore. She danced around the desk as Tsunade pushed back her chair and opened her arms to the small whirlwind. Natsu flung herself into the embrace and let the strong woman hug her until air became a problem. Ba-chan. Air. Important. Need air, she panted, trying to break the embrace. Shizune went to help her and Kakashi exclaimed in a steely growl, "Release my wife, Hokage-sama." In shock at hearing those words from him, she looked up and relaxed her hold on Natsu, who took a much-needed shaky breath. "Thanks, Kashi," Natsu said. He smiled at her but didn't relax his stance. As she stood next to Tsunade, the retrieval team gave their initial report and she dismissed them, reminding them to forget to file an official report of the mission. Yugao grinned at Kakashi and said she'd stop by the next morning to do Natsu's hair, causing Kurenai to frown once more. Something Tsunade didn't miss. Nor did Natsu. She thinks I should cut my hair since I can't fix it myself. She has a valid point. It is a hazard in the field when no one is there to fix it for me. 5 voices said in perfect harmony, "You are not cutting your hair." Natsu spoke quietly. "But it's my hair," she whined, and now Kurenai did smile. She finally understood. The girl's hair wasn't down to her hips because she wanted it that way. It was there because no one she knew would let her cut it. "By the way, Hokage-sama, I support Natsu for the rank of Chunin," she announced. She kicked Kakashi's butt using nothing but her own style of taijutsu, and they were in a tree the whole time. Yugao seconded her vote. And Anko, not to be outdone, added her support. Not only did she kick his for him, she is also quite gifted in genjutsu and trap setting as well as disarming. She's more vicious with her traps than I am with mine. The whole group, including Kakashi, shivered remembering some of the traps they'd encountered. Yugao added, and that's not even mentioning the ninjutsus she used to make her hiding spot. The girl is one of the best all-around nin it has ever been my pleasure to watch in action. All right. Thank you ladies for your time and effort on this mission. Yugao, Shizune, please go find Jiraiya and the others and bring them to my office. Have everyone wait outside until I call you in. Kurenai, Anko, my thanks for a job well done, and I remind you. Keep this mission quiet. No one is to know where you went or why until further notice. You're all dismissed. The 4 women in question vanished from the room. Then she turned to Kakashi, who was leaning against the wall with his hands in his pockets. For once he didn't have that perverted book out. "And you, Kakashi, do you feel she deserves a promotion?" asked Tsunade. He nodded and said, "Her stealth abilities outclass even my own. Pakun said to tell whoever taught her how to hide they did a good job. Normally people leave some trace of their presence, but even the spot where she stopped and rested would have been scentless if it hadn't been for the heat. So her being in heat is what let you track her. Yeah, she didn't know about it, or she probably would have covered up that scent trail also. It was very faint, but it let me know I was on the right path. I kept going, picking up nothing because she was moving and covering her trail too well. It was about 4 hours later that I just suddenly knew which way to go. I wasn't even aware of why I knew. I just did. I found the entrance to the warren she'd created with some very nice earth jutsu. Probably some water jutsu as well. But by that time my thinking wasn't all that clear. All I could think of was that I had to get to her before anyone else found her. I killed a guy not too long after that. I don't really remember anything more about the guy or why I killed him, but I do remember an overwhelming anger that he was there. She did have some nasty traps set up, and the tunnels she dug were very devious and twisted all over the place. I have no idea just how large that warren was, but it was a place where a person could get lost and dead very, very quickly. It took me about 3 days to reach her lair, and yes, it was a lair. A nice one, but still more of an animal's home than a person's. He stopped speaking as his mind replayed the challenge and its outcome. His visible eye grew distant and more smoky than its normal, hard as steel gray. So then what happened? Is she really your mate now? I know Pakun said you would challenge her and she would challenge you, but did you win? He smiled. Hi. I challenged her when I found the lair. She answered my challenge with her own and we fought. He stressed the word, don't need to know more about that than that I did win and she is my mate, my wife. So then the other team arrived to escort you back to Konoha. I think Pakun delayed them for a bit, but I can't be positive. He did. He told me he was going to, and I thought it was a good idea also since I had things I wanted to take care of here before she came home. What did you do while I was gone, Ba-chan? Asked Natsu, showing her curiosity in the way she tilted her head to the side. She was standing between Kakashi's legs now and he had his arms draped over her protectively. Nothing all that drastic. Oh, by the way, what do you wish to do with the property that old complex stood on? I'd build a new one with affordable rents if I could afford it, but I can't, so for now, as soon as I find a way to pay the demolition crew, just tear it down. There was a guy who was supposed to ask for permission to turn it into a park. Didn't he do that? Yeah, I got a request from someone to turn it into a park, but I thought he was just trying to profit off of the lack of ownership papers being attached. Natsu fixed her pseudo-mother with a stern look. Ba-chan, no one profits from building a park that's free to all visitors. There was nothing about the request that led me to think you approved it or indicated in any way, shape, or form the true ownership of the property. I would have denied the request on that basis alone. You have to prove a property is without ownership before claiming it and making changes to it. His request didn't do that. I check on it because you'd lived there and found it was actually your property, so of course after learning that I refused to even consider letting someone do something with it. You should have just asked Shikamaru. He would have told you my wishes. I gave him an overview of all my plans. Well, how was I supposed to know that, Gaki? You were always close-mouthed about your real friends. Wouldn't you be also? Tsunade sighed and reluctantly admitted, yeah, in your shoes, knowing that the wrong person seeing me with one of my friends would get my friend hurt, yeah, I would have hid them also. Gaki, I don't know how the hell you live this life, but you're a hell of a lot better person than I am. Natsu snorted. No, I'm not. She sighed. I have always known, well, since I was 5 anyway, that I had the power to destroy every last one of them. But what would that have proved? What would it have solved? I could have at any time called on the demon's power and destroyed everything my attackers still held dear, but it would not have changed anything. I could have easily have killed those who would hurt Naruto thinking they were hurting an untouchable demon, but again, what would their death prove? So I did what needed to be done. I took their hate, their pain, and I made it my own. And by doing so I changed the demon from an enemy into a trusted friend and mentor. And Ba-chan, don't go telling me it's noble, because all I really wanted at the time was to change the demon enough to get a decent night's sleep. Damn, demon-driven nightmares are the absolute best way to turn a person into an insomniac. And Kyuubi had more anger than the entire village put together, from which she drew on to make those damn nightmares. Compared to her anger, theirs was really not much at all. Inside Natsu and Kakashi's consciousness, Moon Wolf and Kyuubi were talking. Did your cub just growl at me and threaten me? Kyuubi asked the wolf. You know, I think he did. Ballsy brat, but he just found out about the years of nightmares you put the kid through. Still, he is immortal. Maybe you should remind him of that. I will, but cut him some slack. He has never cared for anyone as much as he does and will continue to care for the kid. And he has been alone for a very long time for mortals. Outside the mindscape, the conversation had switched to a new topic. Or rather, an old one. So you think Natsu should be a chunin also? Tsunade asked Kakashi. Hi. I want her back on Team 7, but as herself. She refused to even consider it, so you'll have to order it. Kasi, I said no. She glared up at him from within the cocoon his body had formed around her. Tsunade narrowed her eyes and decided to find out just why Natsu didn't want to be back on Team 7. Why not, Natsu? You already know all about their fighting styles, and so you know exactly what to expect from them. Plus, being on that team, You don't have to worry about anyone getting the wrong idea and saying or doing something they shouldn't simply because you're a girl. Sasuke doesn't care about girls and Sakura is too intent on him to care about you. And you'd be near enough to Kakashi for us not to worry about the remainder of the heat issues. I won't be put on that prick's team again so he can continue trying to kill me. All he wants is revenge because he thinks I killed his brother just to spite him and steal his honor from him. Who? Sasuke? Asked Kakashi. He won't try anything now if he knows what's good for him. Besides, you forget I've seen your real skills. I know you could kick his 7 ways from Sunday and not even break a sweat. I keep telling you he's not a threat. Yeah, and that's real reassuring coming from a man who let him Chidori me repeatedly while denying me the right to use my Rasengan. Well, I didn't say I'd let you kill him either. I said you could kick his. There is a difference. Tsunade just held her peace and let them work it out. She knew what Natsu was concerned about and really the girl was justified. She was very petite and very beautiful and she had absolutely no reason to believe anyone would ever put their life on the line to protect her well-being. No one ever had. Very few people had even known she was a female, but those who knew her as Naruto had never stepped up to protect him when it was clear he was outmatched. He'd had to either take it and hope he lived or pull a rabbit out of a hat and win by himself. If he attacks me with the intent to hurt me in a permanent manner, whether it be to kill me or just to maim me, I will bury his and you will not say a word about it. I will not be the practice target for those two anymore. Deal, smiled Kakashi. He swooped down to capture her mouth before she could say another word. 5 minutes later, Tsunade cleared her throat. Okay, you two. Breathe. Damn it. They broke apart. Kakashi was looking smug while Natsu was blushing. Now okay. Natsu is on Team 7 and I will have the paperwork ready along with her Chunin vest tomorrow. But Kakashi, you hear me well. If that Uchiha boy is allowed to harm a single hair on her head, she won't be the only angry female you'll be dealing with. I don't want to hear about any more incidents with him. He nodded his understanding and she said, take her home. I think it's clear there are other issues you need to take care of and I do have other business to see to today also. They left the office and Kakashi walked his wife towards his family home. He had an apartment, but now that he had a wife he wouldn't be living there anymore. They found Hinata and Shikamaru waiting for them just inside the gate. A high chain fence enclosed the property and a double gate barred entry to the outside world. Kakashi wondered how the duo had gotten past the gate but decided it wasn't important enough to ask about now. Whatever Hinata was holding smelled very good and he led the little party into the foyer of the house. The house hasn't been lived in since my father's time, but please make yourselves comfortable while I see to the heat and lights. He disappeared into the darkness as the three friends moved towards what looked to be a sitting room. Idle conversation filled the air as Hinata asked for details on just how she had become Kakashi's wife and Natsu told her story. Her anger at Kyuubi holding back the information about the heat was clear and inside her mind Kyuubi shivered. Natsu still hadn't gotten back at her for withholding that information. By the time she had finished the tale, Kakashi was standing behind her and the lights were on. Hinata was blushing furiously and Shikamaru was looking just a touch uncomfortable. But then the boy sighed and looked Kakashi in the eye. It's troublesome to the extreme, but know this. If you hurt her in any way, I will do everything in my power to destroy you. I won't hurt her. To do so is to hurt myself. I may be, according to some, a kinky pervert, but I am not into pain. Natsu snickered, as did Hinata. Shikamaru just smirked. So who is the guy who has your eye now? Kurenai was extremely ticked with me for breaking your heart with my lies. You might need to reassure her. Hinata laughed and Kakashi was surprised to find the shy heiress actually had a nice laugh. Of course it didn't compare with his wife's purely musical laugh, but it was nice all the same. Kiba keeps sniffing around, but I just can't go with him. It might be different if he didn't smell like a wet dog all the time, but his whole compound smells like that. Plus there's no way father would approve of him. Father would kill him as soon as he opened his mouth. Okay, so that just means Kiba is out of the question. It doesn't say who isn't. Natsu smirked and turned slightly so that her arm could lay against the back of the couch. She tucked one slender leg under her and leaned her head to rest on her upraised arm. Kakashi took her free hand in his and placed his other hand on her shoulder area, letting his long fingers brush her seal. The intimate contact that brought sent a shudder through her, and Kakashi knew it wouldn't be long before he'd need to get rid of their guests for the night. I think we should go eat that delicious food Hinata-san brought over, he murmured quietly to Natsu. Her eyes opened as her stomach growled. Hinata and Shikamaru smiled again. Show me to the kitchen and I'll get the food I brought over laid out. I knew you wouldn't have anything decent since you've been gone for a week and you're a bachelor, so I took the liberty of cooking a decent meal for you both. Then she dropped by and tempted me with it. It's troublesome, but no one cooks like Hinata. So once she let you smelled her basket, you trailed after her like a puppy dog, teased Natsu. Shikamaru grinned a decidedly wolfish grin and nodded. Do you really like her, Shika? Asked Natsu quietly. He said nothing, but there was a look in his eyes that said he did. You know, I think she's just waiting for you to ask. I think she really likes you as well, and I know Hiyashi wouldn't kill you. The man may be stern, but the only reason he'd kill Kiba is because Kiba won't leave her alone. He refuses to take no as an answer and keeps asking. Each time he asks, he gets bolder and bolder, insisting she's just being shy. But we both know Hinata isn't really shy at all. Kakashi looked startled until Natsu explained. She's quiet, Kashi, but quiet doesn't mean shy. Shika needs to just ask her. You wouldn't be trying your hand at matchmaking now, would you, Natsu? Asked Shika. Not at all, but how will you feel come December to find out she is engaged to someone else? His face went white and Kakashi got the picture. That won't happen, Shikamaru insisted, but quietly. It will if you don't ask her. She'll turn 18 on her birthday. If she is not involved with someone from the village by then, her clan will decide to find a mate for her. She likes you. You like her. So ask already. Natsu stood up and moved around the couch. She led the way into the kitchen where Hinata was nervously waiting. A lot of information passed in a few moments between the two girls without either of them saying a word. Kakashi and Shikamaru just watched as the girls spoke a language both knew they'd never understand no matter how long they lived. Hinata had prepared a beef yakisoba with tempura vegetables and a nice dessert of lightly sugared fruits. They foursome settled into eating and light conversation, to which Kakashi mostly listened and watched Natsu interact with her peers. He couldn't believe how he had missed seeing the friendship between the trio, but then again he had never seen Naruto wasn't real either. After dinner, the girls cleared the table while the guys went off to do whatever guys do while women work. The girls continued to chatter about unimportant things while they cleaned up, and when they were finished, Hinata and Shikamaru prepared to take their leave. Are you sure you don't need me to come by and help you with your hair in the morning? Hinata asked as she was leaving. Yugao said she'd be by to do it for me. Kurenai wasn't happy about that, but nobody will let me cut it, so what am I supposed to do? Natsu complained. Hinata laughed again and crooked a thumb at the horrified expression on Shikamaru's face. I think he'd kill the hairdresser who even took off a snippet of your hair. Anyone who's seen it won't want you to cut it. It's too beautiful and unique for us. Yeah, well, none of you have to put up with its weight either, or the fact that you can't dress it by yourself, Natsu groused. Hinata just smirked and agreed as she waved over her shoulder to the newlywed couple. Shikamaru escorted her out of the gate as Kakashi shut the door and took his wife in his arms. He picked her up and carried her to their bedroom, where he proceeded to release her hair from its captivity before undressing first her and then himself. He'd been waiting a long time to be alone with her again, and he was tired of waiting. Hours later, he lay beside her in their bed watching her sleep and wondering about the things he'd learned recently. One thing was for sure though. Tsunade wouldn't have to hurt him if anyone hurt Natsu. He'd do it himself. He fell asleep thinking about her tears when Kurenai had hurt her feelings. She wasn't as good at protecting herself from things as she had been at protecting Naruto. Or maybe it was simply that she knew Naruto wasn't real and so the things said about him didn't cut the same way. Either way, he knew he didn't want to see her cry again. Ever. The morning of October 10th came and Natsu was strangely reluctant to leave the house. She dithered and puttered around, even going so far as to try and fix her own hair before Kakashi took the brush away from her. He smoothed the locks of molten gold and smiled into her eyes. "You're fine. We need to meet Hokage-sama and get you your vest. Then we need to meet the team and introduce them to the real you." He pretended not to notice her eyes flicking to the calendar, but he knew exactly why she didn't want to leave the house today. She sighed and he stepped back as she moved away from the dressing table. He leaned down and whispered, "Happy birthday, Natsu-chan. I love you." Then he led the way out of the house, keeping a grip on her hand the whole way. She was pale but trying very hard not to show her fear. He knew this had never been a good day for her, but Tsunade would not have time to spare later as the morning celebration took place in the main square and she was expected to speak at it. She was expected to gush about the greatness of the fourth and cry over the tragedy of his death and exult at the destruction of the great fox. But she was not allowed to say a single word of the true hero of that day. The only one who hadn't been given the luxury of being able to die and leave this place behind. The only one who'd not even been given a choice in the matter. Of Natsu's sacrifice, Tsunade was forbidden to say a single word. It always led to Tsunade getting drunk in a series of bars and gambling away any money she had on her at the time until either Jiraiya or Shizune would show up and take her home. They entered the office and were allowed to go straight in. Jiraiya, Shizune and Tsunade were waiting for them. As soon as they came in, Yugao showed up along with Iruka and Shikamaru and Hinata. Iruka kept peeking over at her and she finally got tired of it. Marching over to him, she put her fists on her hips and titled her head to one side in a very foxy way. "Are you just gonna peek at me forever, Ni-san, or will you say hello sometime soon?" He grinned and said, "I have to admit you're a much better girl than you were a boy. But why didn't you tell me? Maybe then I'd know how to react now." She grinned and shrugged. "Gigi didn't want me to tell anyone. A secret is only a secret if one person knows. The more people find out, it ceases to be much of a secret. He didn't want me getting hurt and knew there was no way he could stop it if they knew the truth. So I told no one. But everyone else here knew," he protested. "Yugao was my guardian as a small child. She took care of me after Ba-chan and Ero-sanin left town. So yeah, she knew." Shikamaru and Hinata found out in the academy. Hinata used her eyes and she could just put things together for himself. "But I didn't tell either of them." "But what about?" He indicated Kakashi. "He didn't know at all. Stupid blind bozo," she muttered, causing everyone to snicker as a flush rose above the edge of Kakashi's mask. "How many times am I gonna have to apologize for that?" he asked plaintively. "Until you start practicing what you preach," was her answer, causing everyone to laugh openly. "Anyway," said Tsunade, "you asked last night what changes I've made while you were gone. Well, one of them is that I've abolished the barbaric practice of a morning celebration of this day. If they can't see you for the hero you are, then the true reason for celebrating this day is lost on them and only serves to remind them of what they lost. It does nothing but fuel their negative feelings. Very few even visit their loved ones' graves during the 2 weeks surrounding this date, and none do on this day. So they don't mourn as much as they pretend they do. They celebrate only when they've hurt you. So no more will there be a festival." Natsu was standing there with her eyes wide and her mouth open in total shock. "But the council," she finally stammered out. That brings up the next change. The council has been restructured. I got suspicious of how neatly things had fit together and selected some people to investigate it for me. What we found confirmed my suspicions, so we sent word to someone who wants to meet you very badly." Shizune moved to the main doors as Natsu moved back to Kakashi's side. She wasn't even aware of moving until she felt his arms encircling her. Meeting people as Natsu was not something she'd ever been comfortable doing, having been conditioned all her life to think that the people she met would harm her if they knew who she was. A man in fancy formal dress came into the office and looked around him at the gathered people. Most of the assembly fell to one knee with their heads bent. Most of them did. Tsunade, Jiraiya, Yugao, Iruka, Shikamaru, Hinata and Shizune were all on their knees. Kakashi would have been but for Natsu, who was frozen in fear. She didn't move. She had no idea who this man was, but seeing all her precious people on their knees before her told her that no matter what he said it would happen. The man's eyes fell on her and he smiled with kindness and he bowed to her. She gaped in shock but didn't relax. I am honored to meet the one who saves my empire with every delicate breath you take. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for the sacrifice you have made, young Namikaze Natsu Tsukai. It has been my pleasure to finally be able to do something for you to repay you for what you have given for me. This small deed is but a token of the debt that is owed to you. He rose from his bow, understanding the confusion displayed by the girl but having no clue what to do to ease it. In a shaky voice she brought the room back to normal as only she could. Who are you and why did you bow to me? I am nobody special. Iruka's head snapped up ready to yell at her for not knowing who was standing in the room. Yugao, Shikamaru and Hinata all sighed. Of course she wouldn't know who he was. Shizune just sighed also, but Tsunade, Jiraiya and Kakashi were laughing. She really is a treasure, and so very much like they were, said the man looking to Tsunade, who had stood up as soon as he'd given her permission. Jiraiya stepped to Tsunade's side and said, she is a very interesting combination of the two of them and she's one of a kind. I thought Minato was unique and then he met Kushina. And she was a spitfire no one but Minato could control. It stands to reason that their daughter would be unique and priceless in her own way. Too true, you old pervert. What are you talking about, Ero Sanin? Came Natsu's angry voice from the safety of Kakashi's embrace. Don't talk about me as if I can't hear every word you're saying, you dirty old man. Kakashi smiled widely and did nothing to stop her, though both Yugao and Iruka frowned at her. The daimyo threw back his head and bellowed. When he composed himself, he said, chuckling, she calls you the same thing he did. Who told her? Or did she come up with it on her own? Jiraiya's shoulders drooped as he hung his head. She called me that the first time she saw me in her masquerade as Naruto. No one had told her anything about Minato, so she couldn't have known. Still smiling widely, the daimyo looked at the frog Sanin and told him, you're never gonna be known as anything else now, are you? Jiraiya just shook his head as Tsunade explained. As her alter ego, Uzumaki Naruto, she told everyone what he likes to do to relieve his stress, so now all the young people call him by the nickname also. She was also grinning at Jiraiya's misfortune. Natsu meanwhile was growing angry. She still didn't know who this man was and wanted her questions answered. She started to move forward, but Kakashi tightened his grip. She tilted her head to look up at him. Let me go, Kashi, she said plaintively. He smiled and shook his head as the daimyo and the two Sanin looked over at her. He said. You're gonna say something you shouldn't. Her brow quirked as she said, and why not? I'm the only one here that doesn't seem to know just what the hell is going on, and who the hell is he? If you know, tell me, she demanded. Don't cuss, Kakashi told her, smirking. Her eyes narrowed and her mouth firmed as she said very lowly, do not tell me how to talk. Now tell me who he is or let me go. She didn't even notice she'd done as he requested and left out the swear words. He's the daimyo of Fire Country, Natsu. He's really the one that signs your paycheck and approves your promotions, said Shikamaru. Oh. She was quiet for a minute while she computed that information. Then she blurted out, then why the hell did he bow to me? Looking at the daimyo. The daimyo was far from angered by her actions. He was totally amused. It had been a long time since he'd met someone who didn't fall all over themselves to worship at his feet. And he had a feeling this woman child worshipped no one. He smiled and told her. I told you why I was bowing to you. You deserve every little bit of honor and respect I can give you, and if I had known how you were being forced to live here, I would have removed you from this village long ago. One does not treat the object of their daily freedom with such blatant disrespect as you have been shown. It is only through your own willpower that the demon, who nearly destroyed this village and my empire 18 years ago, remains contained. So I hold you in the highest esteem and will gladly lay down my life for yours any day. So should everyone else in my empire. But, I don't understand. Kakashi just held her tighter while she gathered her thoughts. Tsunade moved towards Natsu and raised her chin so she could look the girl in the eye. I told you, you are a very special girl. You always have been and always will be. No one has the power you do, and it's not the power of the demon that makes you special. It's the power of your heart. You see what others don't. You hear what we all miss. Jiraiya came over to join them. And then you act on what we missed, and it's only later we find you did the right thing. Because of you, my empire has grown by leaps and bounds with new contracts from other small countries as their rulers have been changed through contact with you. Rightful rulers now sit on the throne in countries that might not even exist anymore if they hadn't met you. Fire Country now has less enemies because you never give up once you see a wrong that needs to be set right. I didn't do all that. Ask Sakura. She'll tell you. I just mess everything up. Well, if those were mess ups, please keep it up. Do you have any idea how much business you have brought not only to the Fire Kingdom but to Konoha? How many people who once they meet you end up requesting you for all their future business needs? Child, you are probably the most popular Konoha nin in the outside world. The Queen of Snow Country, the ruler of the Waterfall Village, the ruler of Tea Country, the ruler of Star, and the people of Wave. All these people have given us contracts for trade and missions, and all they ask in return is that we send you to visit once in a while, explained Tsunade. You brought Konoha all that business plus the trade agreement with Sand and with Cloud. It was you being you that did that. Not Sakura or Sasuke or even Kakashi. You did it, said Shikamaru. Hinata added, but it isn't only people outside of Konoha you change. You changed Neji too. He's warmer now. He doesn't live cursing his life and waiting to slip up and die for being born branch. And there are so many others whose lives have changed just by knowing you. Some never met the real you, but they found it hard to look into those eyes and continue seeing a demon there, said Iruka. For others, they had to see the real you, but the effect of knowing you is the same. Don't believe me? Asked Yugao. Look over your shoulder. She pointed to Kakashi, who blinked and then smiled. I have known him since our academy days when he was a 4-year-old walking thesaurus. He has never ever been as happy as he is now. You were that smart, Kashi? She asked, and when he nodded ruefully, added in a wondering tone of voice, what happened? The room lost it again. Everyone was laughing as Kakashi tried to find his ego from where it had fallen to the floor. Or maybe it was on the floor below. And that's what we mean, kiddo. You just can't help but say the first thing that pops into your head. It usually stings and makes people mad, but that's only because it's right on the mark, laughed Jiraiya. You brought my teammate back here, kiddo, and made her become the responsible person we all knew she could be. You made her face herself, and because of that she found the strength to accept her destiny. Thanks, kiddo. Tsunade looked at him and blushed, but she reached out for Natsu also. Kakashi let her go and she was enveloped in a warm hug. He's right, you know. I wouldn't ever have returned here without you, but it was always my destiny to sit in that chair. No matter how much I denied it, I knew it wasn't Naoki or even Dan who were to become the Hokage. I was, and that's why this necklace, she tapped the crystal Natsu wore around her neck, was passed to me when I was about your age. Now it is yours, and someday you will fulfill your destiny and sit in that chair also. It was the first time she had ever admitted to knowing the truth of the necklace and its curse before she'd given it to Naoki. Tears sparkled in her eyes at the mention of the little brother who had died alone and in pain, and her fiancé who'd left her behind, but they were only remnants of tears shed long ago, and she was able to smile at the girl who'd shown her a way to heal her heart and forgive herself. The daimyo took over the conversation. He did have other things to do today, but seeing this one girl come into her rightful inheritance and stand tall and strong in the spotlight of the glory of the sun was something he wouldn't miss for all the tea in the land. It was time his people knew just who this little slip of a beautiful girl was, and he intended they all know it before he left the village. He walked to the patio doors off the office and out onto the patio where the village had been gathered for an announcement they knew nothing of. As soon as he was spotted, people fell to their knees in the traditional pose of respect, pulling others who didn't know him down also. He waited for a minute to make sure their brains were working again before he addressed them. Tsunade came to stand to one side and slightly behind him with Natsu hidden behind her. Jiraiya took up his position on the other side with Kakashi behind him. Yugao, Shizune, Shikamaru and Hinata listened from their places in the office. The daimyo began to speak. 18 years ago on this day a great tragedy faced this village. Indeed, this tragedy was a threat to the entire nation, but the leader that day was a brave and noble young man who was willing to do whatever it took to protect us all. He stopped the demon that was rampaging across our land. But this was not a task he could do alone. To completely contain the threat that faced us, he needed the help of a very special person. One who was only minutes old and had already suffered a monumental loss. He needed the help of his own child. His little girl who didn't even know her own name, whose mother died to bring her into this world just so she could fulfill her destiny on time. He needed Hitaki Namikaze Natsu Tsukai. Tsunade stepped aside, revealing Natsu to the crowd. Using a jutsu he knew full well the price of, he sealed the immortal Kyuubi into a living, breathing and feeling vessel, trusting that she would be strong enough to contain the evil that formed the demon. The jutsu he used put the demon into a deep sleep which only the near death of its container could awaken it from. That was done to give his daughter a chance to grow and come into her own. To give the village and indeed the land a chance to honor her for the sacrifice of her very life and her soul. Because of the seal, her soul is forever tied to the soul of the demon, and should she fail to contain the demon before it is purged or purified, then she is damned along with it. She will become a part of it as it is a part of her. Her father, your Yondaime, knew all this when he sealed the demon, that threatened your hopes and dreams, your lives, into his own little girl. But in spite of his wishes, she was not seen as the hero she is. No one understood her seal. I understand that. But what I do not understand is why no one tried to understand it before they tried to order her death. And what I absolutely cannot understand is why on earth any of you would think your pitifully weak selves could do what the Yondaime, the strongest and best man of his generation, freely admitted he could not. Why did you think you could kill an immortal demon? This I cannot understand. Luckily for all of you, Hitaki Namikaze Natsu Tsukai is a much more understanding and forgiving person than I will ever be, and today I will give her the gift of her freedom. Freedom to be the woman she was born to be by ending the existence of the source of the threat against her safety. I order the execution of the 3 traitors standing below us. People in the crowd were looking at each other in confusion. They had no idea what the daimyo was talking about. They'd never even seen this girl before in their lives. On a dais in front of the crowd were 3 people dressed in the rags of the condemned with black bags tied over their heads. Ropes bound them to each other and constrict the movements of their hands and feet. The crowd looked at the condemned and wondered who they were. The headsman stood off to the side looking very intimidating and stern as he waited for the signal. The daimyo pulled Natsu forward and into the light. The whisker marks on her cheeks stood out, but she was above the crowd and they weren't quite sure of what they saw. Hyuga in the crowd activated their dojutsu and examined the girl. Sasuke activated his eyes to see if he could determine who she was, but his Sharingan told him nothing. The Byakugan told the story however, and it wasn't long before whispers told everyone of the similarity between this girl and one they all knew as Uzumaki Naruto. Natsu has lived in this village every day of her life. When she was 5, to protect her from a fate no little girl should suffer, the Sandaime created a henge for her to turn her into a little boy. The reason for that was those 3 traitors whose life will end today. They wanted the hero of the village walking the streets where they felt she would succumb to their wishes and allow them to use her as a weapon or destroy herself to free the village from the taint of the demon. Because of them, she could never be allowed to be herself in her own home village. She could never have a friend or be seen in a positive light by anyone. These three traitors would have hurt anyone who got close to her. So she hid. She wore orange, acted stupid, played pranks, and never let you see her. But that ends today. Today Uzumaki Naruto no longer exists and Hitaki Namikaze Natsu Tsukai has stepped into his place. Please welcome the daughter of Namikaze Minato, whom you all knew as the Yondaime Hokage of Konoha. He stepped back, but his hands held Natsu firmly in place. She turned her head trying to figure out what she was supposed to do and met Kakashi's eye. His look of pride gave her courage and she turned back to the crowd. She grinned, and in that gaming grin the village knew without a doubt there did stand the child of the Yondaime and the vessel of the nine-tailed demon. The applause began slowly as her few supporters in the group recognized her. After a few minutes, as the applause spread from one person to another, skipping only those who didn't like Naruto, which unfortunately was most of the crowd, the daimyo stepped forward to finish his speech. He went on to list the number of times the trio had tried to kill the demon by breaking the container, and just why those attempts made them traitors in his eyes, since should Natsu have been broken in that manner, all that would have happened is Kyuubi would have taken over the vessel and destroyed them all. He ordered their hoods removed so that all the assembled could identify who had betrayed them in this manner. Standing before the crowd was Danzo, a one-armed old war hawk of a man who wanted to use the Kyuubi container to lead the village to greater acclaim by uniting all of the elemental nations under one banner. Second in line was a bitter prune-faced woman who had lost her family to the demon while she had cowered away in the cabinet which had been built to shelter her two young grandchildren, thereby leaving them at the mercy of the rampaging demon. Her inability to forgive herself for their death had led her to believe the only possible salvation for herself was to finish the job of ridding the world of the threat of the Kyuubi forever. Natsu's heart ached when she heard that, and she couldn't stop herself as she moved to the side of the patio and climbed over the rail. The crowd watched as she calmly walked down the side of the tower and across the ground to the dais. Kaharu stared at the girl mounting the stand and moving towards her. With one small hand, Natsu reached out to touch the face of the wrinkled woman. So softly no one could hear her, she told the old woman, "You were afraid then and you are still afraid today. All this time your fear has ruled you, but that is not how they wanted you to live. Let it end. All of them are waiting for you. Because you loved them, they loved you as well. But love does not mean being blind to another faults, and they all knew yours. Please forgive yourself." Natsu finished speaking and watched as the angry sparkle in the old woman's eyes died out. The sparkle of tears replaced it, and soon she was openly crying. Natsu stepped closer and gathered the woman in as tight a hug as she could manage. She rubbed the woman's back and murmured nonsense words to her as she gave her the comfort she hadn't been able to accept for 18 years. Upon the patio, Tsunade murmured, "There she goes again." She smiled. Kakashi grinned with total pride. Jiraiya smirked and the daimyo laughed. "She does do this all the time, doesn't she?" Tsunade nodded with a long-suffering sigh. He continued looking at Kakashi, "And you married her? Knowing this? Man, I don't envy you keeping up with her." Kakashi's visible eye sparkled as he said, "Well, I didn't exactly know all this, but I should have, and keeping up with her will be a lot of fun. I'll never get bored, that's for sure." Mischief was on everyone's face as Kakashi finished speaking. Back on the dais, Natsu looked to the last man and the crowd followed her gaze. A shocked gasp was heard in the silence. A girl's voice was heard to say questioningly, "Tusen. Why are you? What does?" But mother said, "You're alive. All this time." Natsu turned to the crowd and found her pink-haired teammate on the ground with tears streaming down her face. Ino was beside Sakura in an instant, holding the girl close as Tenten fell into place on the other side. Natsu turned back to the man. Quietly she said, "I think she deserves the truth, don't you? She has lived with the lie since you left your life behind to pursue your chosen path. He glared at her but then looked to his little girl crying on the ground. He looked for his former wife but couldn't find her face in the crowd. He should have known the bitch wouldn't be here for the girl. He sighed and spoke, cold arrogance dripping from each word. Sakura, stand up. Harunos do not grovel in the dirt. Our clan lost enough 18 years ago. Do not squander the only thing we have left. I did this for those we lost. For everything the Harunos gave up. Unwillingly. We did not choose to stand and fight, but we were ordered to throw away our lives. It would have meant something if that damn man had not chosen to merely seal the demon away in this pitifully weak human shell. But he did. He made our losses trivial. Worthless. Without meaning. So I chose to disappear and work silently in the shadows to finish the task that fool of a man chose not to. I chose to restore meaning to the deaths of our clan. I still choose meaning in death. He lunged forward towards Natsu. Kaharu stepped in front of her. Not that there was anything he could have done, bound by the ropes and tied to his fellows as he was. Well, looks like she's finished saving another soul from the darkness, but I think the men are lost causes. Time to wrap this up. The daimyo stepped forward and introduced the last member of the traitorous three. Natsu held Kaharu by the arm and refused the headsman access to the woman. Raising her voice loud enough to be heard by everyone, she said, "To execute them is your right, as they have acted in the past and will continue to act in the future against the expressed best interest of not only this village but the land of fire as a whole. However, to execute her for the same reason is folly that will only damn all of us here today. Yes, she acted wrong. She made poor choices knowing she was making a choice at the time, but everyone deserves a second chance if they are willing to see it and accept it with the intention of changing the steps they take. Will you give her the opportunity to show you her new path? Will you give her the time to find her way home again?" She was looking up at the daimyo as she spoke, and other than holding the old woman by the arm gave no indication she was even aware of anyone else there. "But she has betrayed you. She has betrayed your father. She has betrayed her old teammate. Why would you wish to give her another chance?" questioned the daimyo. "She was lost then. I will not claim she didn't know what she was doing. She most assuredly did, but I will stand by the fact that she was lost in her own self-blame and grief." She turned her head and looked into the sad eyes of the broken old woman. She gave her a soft smile. "But now she is back. It will take time, but she will be free again. She will find the woman she was, and the will of fire will carry her home when she is ready." She turned back to the patio. "But that day is not today. As you wish. I will give this traitor a chance to prove her remorse. She shall serve you as your vassal under supervision until she proves you have no reason to fear her presence." Traitor stepped forward. Kaharu stepped forward and with her head lowered waited for what the daimyo would say. "From this day forward you will live at the sufferance of your master. Her will is your will. Her wish is your wish. Her order is your command. Is this acceptable to you?" "Hi, my lord daimyo. I will serve the lady Hitaki Namikaze Natsu Tsukai. Then I order the oath of binding be placed on you by the time the sun sets on this day. You will be held under full guard until the sealing is complete. This seal is to be placed where you may not remove it and bound to you in a manner to prevent anyone else from removing it also. You shall also swear the oath of servitude, as will your descendants should you have any remaining. Do you?" Kaharu starts to answer, but Natsu stepped forward again. She was frowning and shaking her head in denial. "No, that is not fair. I know who her remaining family is, and I will not bind Moegi to the chains of her grandmother's choice. If you wish Kaharu to serve me for her atonement, then so be it. But Moegi is only a child and she has done me no wrong. Is this true? Or are you covering for the child because she is a child?" Natsu's eyes narrowed and her anger at being called a liar radiated off her small form. Planting her fists on her hips, she glared up at the daimyo and stamped her tiny foot, leaving a broken board underneath it. "I do not lie," she stated in a clear voice that defied him to continue. Several titters ran through the assembly. Moegi, though scared and confused, stepped up beside her grandmother. In a quiet voice she said, I am Moegi, my lord. This is my grandmother on my mother's side. If it is your will that I be used to hold my grandmother to her bond, then I will do as you command. Oh no, you won't, declared Natsu, not about to accept the binding of a child. The daimyo was reminded strongly of Kushina in that moment. That woman had been just as fiery and just as determined that children should not pay the price for the actions of adults. All right, Lady Natsu, if you truly believe the girl should not be held hostage to her grandmother's bond, so be it, but it is unusual. Unusual or not, it is what is right. She did no wrong. She should not be hostage for words or deeds not of her own making or choice. Parents and guardians should protect and love their charges, but children should never suffer for the choice they made. Moegi can move in with me, if she so chooses, and has no place she would rather live, but she is not and will not be my servant. She has her own honor, and I know she will do a fine job of protecting it, with her grandmother's fate to serve as her example. And that neatly tied up the situation in such a manner it could not be changed without the daimyo looking like a child abuser. And also pointed out quite clearly how Natsu felt about her own sire using her as he did. Guards from the prison came to lead Kaharu away as Moegi looked on tearfully. As Natsu led the girl off the dais, she whispered, "Thank you, Naruto. I mean Natsu, for saving my grandmother. I know you didn't have to. But I did, Moegi. Can you say you and the Konohamaru Corp wouldn't do the same thing for me? She's your grandmother. Our lifestyle is hard enough without having to try and hold your head up for a task you never did. Your grandmother should pay for and receive the rewards for the actions she chose to make, don't you think? Just as you should for things you choose to do." "Well, maybe. Yeah, I guess, but still I know you didn't have to speak for her." Hyuga Hiyashi fell into step beside them with his daughters and nephew in tow. "That is correct. She did not, but she would not be the person we know if she did not. She would not be my heir's best friend or my nephew's idol. Nor would she be the example I hold up to my youngest daughter. Remember this day well, young Moegi, and learn from it. There is always a chance to change not only your own destiny but the destiny of those you meet." Then he led the children of his clan away after a brief bow in Natsu's direction. They were almost to the tower when Sasuke popped up in front of her, putting his hand up to halt their progress. "Who are you? Why haven't I seen you before? I know everyone of note in this village, but I do not know you. So you will go no farther until I get my questions answered. Get out of my way, Uchiha. I have no need to answer any of your questions. You will not proceed until I know who you are. You would know who I am if you'd clean your ears out once in a while, Tem. I said get out of my way. I do not know you. I know who you fooled the daimyo into thinking you were, but I know full well the vessel is a boy. A boy who used to be on my team. A boy named Uzumaki Naruto, and he deserves more than to be brushed aside by filth like you. So you will tell me the truth or you will progress no further." Behind him a steely voice grated, "You were told who she is, Uchiha. She told you to get out of her way. Now do it." Tsunade stood there, backed up by all the people Natsu had met up with in the Hokage's office. Kakashi was suddenly beside Natsu, standing just in front of her in a protective stance. "I know what Naruto is, and yet the daimyo said she was the vessel. This cannot be, since I know Naruto is a boy and he is the vessel. I am an Uchiha, and as such I demand the truth. I am Hitaki Namikaze Natsu Tsukai. That is all you need to know, and more than you are entitled to know." "Yeah, right. According to the fairy tale you spun out for the Hokage and the daimyo, you're the daughter of the Yondaime, but no sane person names his child Summer Day. That's so phony, it only shows you lack imagination. And you're claiming a connection to my sensei, whom I know full well has no human connections remaining. All he has are ghosts in his own mind. So again I demand you submit to me and answer my questions." "Submit? To you?" Her voice had gone deathly quiet, and everyone backed up as she automatically slid into her fighting stance. "You think because you wear a clan symbol you are entitled to far more than your existence merits. If you can beat me, I will give you your answers. But if I win, you will never challenge me again. Is it a deal?" I accept, and you are going to wish you knew more about your opponent the next time you choose to challenge someone above your station. Okay. A challenge has been issued and accepted. Terms have been made and the fight shall take place at the Chunin Stadium today in an hour, announced Tsunade, stepping between the two quickly. She knew Natsu's style of fighting and she knew Sasuke's style too well to allow the two to commence their fight here. Kakashi smirked and walked off with Natsu. He wanted to get her home and take care of another little problem he knew had arisen due to all the range of emotions she'd gone through that day. Kaka-sensei, aren't you going to give Sasuke-kun some pointers? Asked Sakura, arriving on the scene just in time to hear the challenge and its terms. Why would I give him pointers on how to fight my wife? Kakashi asked over his shoulder. You're what? Shrieked Sakura as Sasuke stood in open-mouthed shock. That would be why her name is Hitaki Namikaze, don't you think? He smirked at them. See you all in an hour. He walked off with Natsu, leaving his students gaping at his back. Have to give him credit for one thing, smirked Jiraiya. At Tsunade's questioning look he added, he's got style enough to shut up his team. Everyone looked at the two Chunin who were still standing there trying to figure out when their sensei had gained a wife and how come they hadn't known about it before this. It was clear to both of them that the girl was comfortable with him, yet neither could say they'd ever seen her before today. An hour later, Natsu was at the stadium stretching her muscles. She was careful which exercises she did, as she really didn't want to give away too much information, even if that information was only how flexible she really was. Besides, Kashi was watching her intently and grinning like a perverted fool, as was Jiraiya. She finally had enough of their staring and whirled on them both. If you two don't take your eyes and put them back where they belong, I'm gonna poke them out. Would it help if I said I like what I'm seeing? Asked Kakashi as Jiraiya grinned and scribbled in his little black book. I don't know, Kashi. You like getting your kick that much? She shot back as Jiraiya cackled. Only when you kiss all the little and make them better when you're done, he replied. Her face flamed and without thinking she charged his position. He vanished in a swirl of leaves as Jiraiya made sure he had the entire exchange recorded word for word. Natsu was looking for where Kashi had gone. Tsunade and the daimyo arrived, and after giving Natsu a smile full of their personal belief in her, both took a seat in the VIP box. The stadium began to fill up as she waited for the arrogant Uchiha to arrive. Kakashi came back to her side and wrapped her in a tight hug. He whispered in her ears for a minute, causing her to flush bright red and punch him in the stomach, a move that was not missed by Jiraiya or the daimyo. The daimyo laughed and said, she's just like her mother. I wonder whose fighting style she inherited. In a way, neither. She has her own style that is reminiscent of both of them, yet can't really be said to be from either one over the other. Tsunade explained. Her upbringing forced her to pick it up in bits and pieces, since most the people didn't want to teach her at all, lest the demon child become too powerful and she reached a point where she couldn't be killed. So she combined what she saw others use, from street brawlers to samurai, and included ninja into her own style. She even included the acrobatics of a band of traveling circus performers and a couple of drunks who liked to fight into the style. It's totally wild and unpredictable. And the Uchiha is in for an eye-opening experience if he thinks his Sharingan gives him any advantage over her, added Jiraiya, who'd arrived to hear Tsunade explaining Natsu's taijutsu style. Hayate Gecko was once again acting as a proctor for the matchup, and he was waiting with Natsu in the center of the ring. Both were growing irritated with the Uchiha. He was late, and after giving him another 10 minutes, Natsu yelled up at the VIP box. Hey Ba-chan. You think he got scared and ran away again? Nervous titters filled the stadium as Tsunade's lips twitched. Sakura bellowed back, Sasuke-kun is no coward. He'll be here and he's gonna own your. No one owns my Haruno. And I sure as hell wouldn't sell it to that crooked stick. At that comment, the entire stadium roared. Some were laughing openly and others were offended because she'd just called the Uchiha gay, while still others were offended she would insult their ideal of the perfect ninja. Sasuke arrived in the stadium and did not receive the applause he'd expected. He was pretty much ignored until he cleared his throat and asked if they could please get this farce over with sometime this century. That eager are you, Sasuke? Okay then. Let's rock and roll. She slid into her first kata position and waited to see what he would do. Gekko started the match and got out of the way, having watched too many battles in which one or the other had fought. He just knew this matchup was gonna get ugly. Sasuke had underestimated his opponent and paid the price for it as she dashed across the stadium. With an agility and versatility he did not expect, she pummeled him, never staying in the same spot for longer than it took her to make contact with his body. She was enhancing her blows with chakra and had made contact 5 times before he had even moved. He tried hitting her, but she couldn't be touched as she flipped and twisted and bent to avoid each strike he tried to make. Her smile never faltered as she pummeled him. Only by watching Kakashi could anyone tell she wasn't being touched. Finally she backed off and smirked at him. Are you ever gonna do something? She quirked a foxy grin his way and said, you look a little worse for wear there, Uchiha. What's the matter? Don't feel good today? Where's that famous Uchiha know-how and aplomb you're always spouting off about? Sasuke activated his eyes and slid into his own first position. With one hand he protected his torso while the other hand was slightly extended in her direction. She didn't let up as she asked, so you think you can stop me this time, Tem? She laughed in pure glee. She created 2 clones and had them wait for her signal. Then she charged him again. He did a little bit better estimating where she was gonna be at any given time, but he still couldn't hit her. So he switched to trying to slow her down by grabbing her by the hair, intent on forcing her to stay still so he could hit her. He missed, as her hair seemed to flow out of his grasp before he could close his fist around the silky stuff. He grew desperate and began shooting off fireball after fireball, hoping to get lucky and hit her by chance. Her laughter rebounded around the stadium, letting everyone know she was having a grand time as she outran his temper-induced fire. Scorch marks showed the trail of her progress around the area. She was flitting and seeming to fly from one contact point to another without her feet ever making contact with a solid surface. Cut after cut, bruise after bruise opened on the Uchiha, and all anyone could see of her was a golden-green blur as she flew around. Then she hit him with an uppercut and he went flying into the air. Showing a skill she had never shown before, she followed him up, kicking him higher all the while, her small feet hitting hard enough to bruise internal organs and chip bones. By the time the air was growing thin and gravity was finally winning the battle for their bodies, his back was a black and blue mess. Slowly they fell back into the stadium. Natsu controlled his descent by kicking him back up whenever he began to fall too fast. She knew the height she had kicked him to was too great a height for him to survive the fall without a fatal injury. So she kept him alive by halting his momentum with a reverse in his direction. She used her wind chakra to slow her own descent, but she didn't like him well enough to afford him the same courtesy. He didn't do anything. His body was in too much pain and his mind had shut down. He'd expected her to be a decent challenge, but she was out of his league and he suspected he hadn't seen anything yet. By the time she let him fall to the ground, all he could do was lay still and try not to groan too loudly. It disgusted him to know he hadn't progressed far enough to beat a little slip of a girl like her, and yet he'd thought he was close to being able to beat his brother had Naruto not beaten him to it. Damn, he hated that orange-wearing loud mouth. As soon as he found him, he was going to kill him. The next thing he knew, the match was called and he was being loaded onto a stretcher for transport to the hospital. Kakashi was standing next to the strange girl who'd beaten him so thoroughly, and he felt his gut twist in a way that had absolutely nothing to do with his injuries. Kakashi was his sensei, he thought in rage. He was supposed to be standing next to him, checking to see what his injuries were and if he'd recover. Not fawning over some useless girl. What the hell was wrong with the people today? He was being ignored for some new chick no one even knew the slightest little thing about. His fist clenched in anger, and if he could have, he'd have gotten off the stretcher to roast the girl where she stood. How dare she subvert everyone's attention away from him? Sakura's voice penetrate the fog of his thoughts as she whined in his ear. He didn't really listen, but it was impossible to totally ignore her whining completely. She'd held him up by whining about how he needed to teach the girl a lesson for her also, since the girl hadn't even attempted to save her father, though she'd spoken up for the old woman. She'd cried and carried on until he finally engaged her in just to get her to shut up, even though he knew she wasn't ovulating yet. She'd been so pathetically eager it made his back teeth ache, and he'd realized he was clenching them so he wouldn't kick her out and ruin his chance at an offspring off her useless hide. Maybe he should just kill her to get the final form of his famous eyes. Nah, she didn't mean enough to him for that, but he wasn't even sure he'd like a child from her. I mean, come on. Whoever heard of an Uchiha with pink hair? And he was sure that the hair was a dominant trait that bred true generation after generation. Arg. His head hurt just thinking about it. But she had distracted him from seeing his sensei fawning over the new girl. When he got out of the hospital, he was going to teach that little bitch a lesson. One way or another, he would teach her not to mess with her betters. On that thought, one of the nurses stuck a needle in his arm and he passed out with dark thoughts of vengeance on his mind. What he hadn't known was that both Natsu and Kakashi had checked on his status shortly after the medics finished examining him. They knew all he had was bumps and bruises, though he'd be in traction for a bit to allow his spine to recover. She had kicked him hard enough to chip a couple of the vertebrae, and that required he be held immobile while the small bones healed. Tsunade wasn't too happy with her for that, as Sasuke was a terrible patient, but she could understand where Natsu had been coming from. Too many times, Natsu had been the one in pain, and complaining about it had done her no good. And as Kakashi had explained things, it might be better for Team 7 as a whole. When Sasuke and Sakura finally found out Natsu was going to be a part of the team, he'd told her point blank that Natsu had a score to settle with the Uchiha, and now that she didn't need to hold back on her skills, this would keep building up until one of the two forced the issue. If they let the fight occur in that manner, one or both might die. What was certain was the village would lose the Uchiha because Kakashi would kill the brat. And so they'd arrived on the scene, and she'd decided the fight really was inevitable. She'd set the rules for Natsu, knowing the girl was the one that needed to know how far she could go. All the involved parties had little doubt about the arrogant boy being able to even touch Natsu. They knew if she could beat Kakashi using only her taijutsu, she could beat Sasuke since he couldn't beat Kakashi. However, there had been the fact that Kakashi wasn't trying to win when she'd beaten him up. And that fact had meant there was a chance, however slim. The girl was Junin material, and everyone who knew her knew it. Now the trick for Tsunade was talking Kakashi into letting her sign the girl up for the testing. She decided it could wait a week or two. At least until he was past the point of wanting to kill anyone who so much as scratched her.